Hello and welcome to the 12th episode in this SQL for Data Analysis series covering subqueries with me, James from Matador Software. So I'd like to go into a few slides first as we're getting into the more complex topics. So just to introduce the topic, then we'll do our usual live environment within SQL Server, look at subqueries, code out some examples, and we've got 3 examples today. So a subquery simply is a query within a query, an inner query. They provide data to the enclosing query. They can return individual values or a list of records, and they must be enclosed with brackets. Essentially, a subquery is used to return data that will be used in the main query as a condition to further restrict the data to be retrieved. But we'll look into this, so don't worry if that didn't make too much sense. You can use subqueries in place of an expression, within or not in, where we can supply multiple conditions in the where clause, with any or all, exists or not exists, in update, delete or insert statements in the from clause. So as you can see in this example here, when we run the inner query, what happens is the first step is actually to retrieve the results from the subquery. So that would be select employee ID from employee where the job ID is equal to 13. You produce the values or the list, and then you take the actual query itself, the start of the actual whole query, so in this case update employee, and we execute that against the results of the inner query. So that's how it will work within SQL itself. So important to note that. What we're going to look at today: subqueries within select statements, subqueries using conditional logic, so we'll use some where and some operators, and then we're going to look at quite a good example, subqueries within the update statement, so actually to update values within our tables. As usual, I'm most active on YouTube and LinkedIn, so there's links there if you do want to subscribe, connect, follow, whatever that may be. I'm pretty active and share content on all areas of data and BI on both platforms. So we're in the pubs database that we've previously imported from GitHub in this series. We're going to look at titles, that table, and we're going to start off with a simple example using subqueries within our select portion of our query. So in this first example, a simple example, what we want to achieve here is we want to take the title and the year-to-date sales as a column, and we'll use our subquery to return the average year-to-date sales from the same table from titles. And what we want to do is get a blanket statement against each title of the average sales, and we can use our year-to-date sales column as a sort of comparison to see how each title is performing. And from there, again, we could go in and build, like a difference column where we could subtract the two values or whatever, show the difference. Right now, we're not going to, but we can see how this subquery is a great way to sort of add a condition and isolate a bit more information there. So in this second example, applying it in a bit more of a useful or rich form with the conditional logic, let's say we want the title type in year-to-date sales as our columns, but we want to restrict the information again using our subquery. So we can take it from titles, but now we want to say where the year-to-date sales is greater than the average year-to-date sales. So we use that subquery to restrict that information. And as we can show, if we were to highlight the subquery, the select average year-to-date sales, that inner query, and from titles, and if we actually ran that, you would see what happens first. So in the process, the inner query is run, we get that 6090 average, and then we take those specific items where the year-to-date sales is greater than the average, and we return those 4 rows. So that should start to make sense as to how we do it. So for this last example, I wanted to look at the employees table, and what we're really concerned with here is the job ID and the job level. And if I was to propose a sort of question, and we'll go through and look at how we could solve that, or a scenario, and what we want to do here is update the job level by 5 points for every employee with the job ID of 13. So a fairly standard business use case. So what we would need to do first is use the SQL update statement to modify components of a table and reference the employee table. And we want to set the job level to the current job level plus 5 points. And we use where the employee ID and in where we can specify multiple values in a where clause. And then we can select everything from that employee table where the job ID is equal to 13. So you see the command was completed successfully. But if we run the inner query, the subquery, we get those 3 rows. And then what happens, as you saw, there were 3 rows that were completed successfully. Those items are then modified and the job level increased accordingly. So that's quite a good example and way that we can sort of harness the power of subqueries. So as usual, if you like this content, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe and share. Thank you.